All right, guys, welcome to my breakdown of the Old King and the Good Queen's children, better known as Jaehaerys Targaryen and Alysanne Targaryen. Guys, please like and subscribe if you can, and welcome to the finale weekend. I will be having two videos. This will be the first one, and then I'll release my season 2, episode 8 prediction video this week. Figured this would be a good time to make this video because we know about the dragon seeds. Um, we want to know like who Hugh and Ulf are related to, and maybe some other correlations. Because again, we really only see Jaehaerys. We don't see any of his kids. We only see him and his grandkids at the beginning of the show. We never see any of his children in the show. Technically, we do see Alyssa in a dream, and that will be fun to talk about later. But yeah, Jaehaerys outlives all of his kids, and so does Alysanne outlives almost all of them. But in total, the king and queen had 13 children. However, some of them did not live for very long. And throughout the video, I will be covering some significant quotes about these characters, their personalities, some actions they may have taken, and who they are directly related to in House of the Dragon, because, everyone's related to everyone in the show because they're Targaryens and they do incest. All right, let's go to the first child. Aegon Targaryen. Yes, another Aegon Targaryen, but don't worry, he is not very significant. So as we can see from the quote, Aegon died within 3 days of being birthed, and there is much more around that quote. So Jaehaerys and Alysanne's mom, Alyssa Velaryon, now technically Alyssa Baratheon at this point in time, because she is now married to Rhaegar Baratheon, is also pregnant at a very old age. Alyssa would be like 41 at this point. Remember, Alyssa is the mother of Jaehaerys and Alysanne at this point in time, so it was a bit of a miracle that she could get pregnant even. And in further fun fact about Alyssa and Rhaegar, they are the parents of Bormund Baratheon, who we see in House of the Dragon season 1 before Boros Baratheon takes over, and the parents of Jocelyn Baratheon, who is the mother of Rhaenys Targaryen. More to come about Jocelyn Baratheon later on. Additionally, Aegon was named after, of course, the Conqueror, but also for Jaehaerys and Alysanne's eldest brother, Aegon the Uncrowned. Aegon the Uncrowned was supposed to be the king after Aenys died, but Maegor the Cruel ended up killing him on his dragon Balerion, as you can see in the bottom left picture. Aegon the Uncrowned and Maegor the Cruel's dragon battle between Balerion and Quicksilver was the first ever dragon battle in Westeros. It wasn't very fair, guys. Balerion won that one pretty easily. It was kind of like Vhagar and Arrax. Quicksilver was much, much smaller, and Balerion was huge. Now looking at the bottom center image and referring to the last part of the quote, here's what Alysanne was talking about. So in 51 AC, Alysanne was pregnant, and they were doing a royal progress, her and Jaehaerys. They started out in the Crownlands, then they moved to the Riverlands. Once they got to the Riverlands, they went to this place called Maidenpool. Within Maidenpool, there's this like healing water within the castle. It's called Jonquil's Pool. And basically, Alysanne thought it would be a good idea to, go in there. She was pregnant to heal. But at this time, there was still a lot of people within the Faith of the Seven that thought the incest of the Targaryens was an abomination and disgusting. So these women try, because there's only women around Alysanne. There's no Kingsguard. No one's really guarding her. So these women, septas, try and kill her and her abomination of a baby. And it doesn't work out. The guards actually hear the screams and come in and kill all the septas. Lord Mooten hangs a bunch of people. But this actually leads to Alysanne getting a strong female protector for situations like this. And this also, guys, leads into the idea of Targaryen exceptionalism, or the doctrine of exceptionalism, which I would like to discuss real quick. So Jaehaerys' doctrine of exceptionalism had won over most of the pious in the realm, but not all. Some of the women who tended Jonquil's Pool believed the pool's sacred waters would be polluted if the queen was pregnant with the king's abomination. So again, the doctrine of exceptionalism, or exceptionalism for short, is the precept that King Jaehaerys Targaryen worked out with the Faith of the Seven in order for them to tolerate the continued practice of incestuous marriages by House Targaryen. It was developed by King Jaehaerys with help from Septon Oswyck and Septon Barth. The supporters of this doctrine were called exceptionalists. Basically, it just said Targaryens can do incest because we can ride dragons and we're different from all of you people, but you guys aren't allowed to do incest. So that is what the doctrine of exceptionalism is. But that's fun. So that was Aegon Targaryen, guys. He died again within 3 days of being born. And again, Alysanne blames it on the attack at Jonquil's Pool. All right. Daenerys Targaryen. Ooh, that's fun, guys. Not the one we know, though. Princess Daenerys Targaryen was the eldest daughter and second-born child of King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne. This is the first Daenerys we hear of in the books besides, the one we all know and love. Daenerys was a happy child, fearless. Everyone really loved her. She was always laughing and smiling. Daenerys was kind of a bit of a tomboy, and she was always grass stained and mud spattered, it said. She was seen as the darling of the realm and considered a great beauty. So the plan was to have her marry her younger brother Aemon, who we'll be getting into the next section. But again, she died in 60 AC from the shivers. So guys, the shivers is like basically our flu. The shivers progresses quickly. First, the afflicted will get a chill, then shivering that gets progressively worse until it is so bad that the teeth chatter and the arms and legs convulse uncontrollably. So basically, there was a really bad case of the shivers in 59 to 60 AC. Daenerys caught it, and this kind of went against the idea of Targaryens, like essentially like people thought that Targaryens couldn't get sick, but this proved wrong. So when she was dying on her deathbed, Jaehaerys was like, get her a dragon, get her a dragon, because there's kind of this idea that dragons make Targaryens strong and like not get sick. We see this with Aenys and Quicksilver. Aenys was the small baby, and when Quicksilver was put in his cradle, like he got better. And we can also kind of see this with Viserys and Balerion. After Balerion dies, it almost seems like Viserys' health gets worse and worse. So she got a really bad case of the shivers, and she ended up dying. And during the reign of Jaehaerys the First Targaryen, many suspected that the plague was spread by rats. So this actually started the idea of Jaehaerys breeding rat catchers, which eventually leads to the idea of um, blood and cheese. So kind of Jaehaerys did something unintentional that happened 40 years later by letting these rat catchers in because his daughter Daenerys died. So I thought that was kind of interesting. This is actually how rat catchers started to be like get into the Red Keep at such a high level. Um, but yeah, that is Daenerys Targaryen. She only lived for 7 years, and let's get into Aemon Targaryen. I'm gonna have a sip, guys. My mouth is getting a little dry. Prince Aemon Targaryen was the third child and second born to the son, the old king and good queen. He was born when Daenerys was 2, and again, they were originally supposed to marry and one day be the king and queen of Westeros. But as we see, Daenerys again dies in 60 AC. And I did think in the first quote, it's kind of in the first quote, Aemon's features were interesting. He looked so Valyrian and Targaryen that it was even rare how he looked comparatively to people in old Valyria. So he was like apex, like Targaryen looking, Valyrian looking person. And looking at the back end of the first quote, that egg that Daenerys places in Aemon's cradle would later become our favorite little fireworm, Caraxes. So that small quote there is somewhat significant because this is around the time when Caraxes would also hatch. Caraxes is a pretty significant dragon doing crazy things and Dance the House the Dragon. Well, kind of. I mean, Daemon's been at Harrenhal for like 6 episodes now, so kind of. Poor Caraxes. He's probably getting bored. So remember, Aemon marries Jocelyn Baratheon, guys. I said in an earlier slide. And together they have Rhaenys Targaryen in the year 74 AC. It's the Rhaenys we know in the show. And at this time in the books, Rhaenys is actually pregnant with Laenor, which is kind of fun. So during the early 90s AC, there were Mirach pirates, which is kind of the precursor of the Triarchy, guys, which we see in the show, that took over Tarth, which you can see is imaged to the bottom left. Tarth is a large island off of the Stormlands, close to Storm's End. Corlys and Aemon's job was to go to Tarth and defeat the pirates. Actually, Meleys and Rhaenys were supposed to come too, because Rhaenys was riding Meleys at this time when Aemon, her father, was riding Caraxes. But Rhaenys was pregnant with Laenor during this time, so they said no, no. But when Aemon was simply just talking to a soldier from his army, a Mirach bowman shot an arrow that was most likely meant for the Tarth soldier, but hit Aemon and killed him. And this could be the beginnings of the Maester conspiracy, which eventually leads to the Great Council 101 AC, and we will get into that topic in the next slide. So Balon Targaryen, number 4. So he lived pretty long. He lived 44 years old. He was born in 57 AC and didn't die until 101 AC. He was the trigger for the Great Council of 101 AC, which leads to the thought of the Maester conspiracy, which I'll talk about in this slide. But first, let's talk a little bit about Balon. He was called the Spring Prince because he was born in the spring. He was called Balon the Brave because he was very brave. Apparently, like he hit Balerion with like a stick and was like, haha, that's funny. So yeah, that's how he got the Brave nickname. He was the father of Viserys and Daemon, and actually had a third kid named Aegon who was stillborn. And his rider, his dragon, he mounted, I should say, Vhagar. Also, I do think that it makes sense that Ulf the White is Balon's son, according to the timeline at least. Ulf is around 40, and Balon was single by about 84 AC. You'll see why in the next slide when I talk about Alyssa. But Ulf would probably be born around 85 to 90 AC, so that would make sense. So that's kind of a cool quote in the first quote. Balon was named after a second son who ruled Dragonstone sometime before the conquest, because Balon is the second son to Aemon. Balon was smaller than Aemon. He was said to be louder and lustier, though. He was named the Spring Prince again because he was born during one of the basically the first day of spring. Balon married Alyssa Targaryen, who we see in that weird scene with Daemon in season 2, episode 5. Balon and Alyssa apparently were very much in love, like their parents, Jaehaerys and Alysanne. And the first night they bed after the wedding, it was said that you could hear Alyssa from across the narrow sea. So that's kind of cute, guys. Okay, but now let's get into the Maester conspiracy and Balon's death and all that fun stuff. Okay, so now going to Balon's death. This is something else that feeds into the Maester conspiracy. So another mysterious and conspicuous death of a Targaryen who was supposed to be the king. Could it have been Otto and the Maesters? We even hear in season 1, episode 4 of House of the Dragon when Otto is fired that Viserys is somewhat skeptical how his father Balon actually died. Basically, this theory discusses that the Maesters who hate magic and dragons and prefer science and logical things of all sorts wanted to get rid of all the dragons. So they worked with the Hightowers to implement basically a 30-year plan to kill off the dragons by implementing a Targaryen civil war. So how would this all start from Balon's death? Basically, Balon died of like a burst belly, which is like an appendix rupture, and it is all just a little sketchy because the Maesters could have easily like given him something to like give him that like belly burst. And again, guys, even in the Great Council of 101 AC, who's counting all the votes? It's the Maesters. So the Maesters wanted to kill off the strong heirs, Balon and Aemon of King, and have this like great council. I mean, I know it's kind of complicated and complex and does sound a little fishy, but it kind of makes sense because this would be a bunch of Maesters working together, so they could probably do this. So they basically tried to kill Jaehaerys' heirs off, which they did. And then this led to the Great Council of 101 IC, who was actually suggested by a Maester, who you'll see later on in this video. Ooh, this is so many connections, so much fun. But basically, the Maesters wanted Viserys over Meleys, and they were the ones counting the votes because remember at this time Viserys no longer rides Balerion, is seen as kind of the weaker king, and Rhaenys is strong and has a dragon Meleys. So what the Maesters wanted to do was just create this succession crisis over and over again with the Targaryens, and they thought it would be easier with Viserys. Again, it's all skeptical. I doubt it's going to really be shown in the show, but I kind of want to share it with you guys because I think it's a pretty cool theory about the show. But let's move on to the 5th child, Alyssa Targaryen, who we see in the show in Daemon's Dream in episode 5 of season 2. She was born in 60 AC and died when she was only 24 years old in 84 AC. She was the dragon rider of Meleys, the Red Queen, and again, the mother of Viserys and Daemon. Alyssa was named after her grandmother, who we talked about earlier, Alyssa Velaryon, who was wed to Aenys Targaryen and then Rhaegar Baratheon. Alyssa was a tom girl in many senses. She loved to fight and ride, and it was said that she never left Balon's side when they were kids. And as we know, those two really loved each other, if you know what I mean. Alyssa rode, Alyssa rode Meleys. That is a theory I have as to why Daemon has that trippy dream with Alyssa after Meleys dies, because remember, that's immediately after Meleys dies. He can sense that there's something wrong, and that's why he has that dream. It's just a theory. And a fun fact for all of you guys, Meleys was said to be the fastest of all of the dragons. And in the show, Alyssa is much prettier than how she is described in the books. However, Daemon was only 3 years old when she died, so there's really no way for him to know what she exactly looked like. She also took Viserys and Daemon out riding on Melees with her when they were little kids. Very wholesome. So Alyssa had two boys who lived, and her third son, Aegon, is actually the reason she unfortunately died in 84 AC, when Daemon was only 3 and Viserys was only 7. She died in the birthing bed, and this to me alludes to the Emma Arryn scene at the beginning of House of the Dragon. Another Targaryen woman dying in the birthing bed. Hey, maybe someone should tell them that incest is bad. But yeah, that's Alyssa Targaryen, guys. Let's move on to Septa Maegelle Targaryen. So, of course, she was the sixth child. She would have been the now only the third daughter born. She was the third daughter born after Daenerys and Alyssa. And actually, a fun fact about the year Maegelle was born, she was born in 62 AC, when the roads of Westeros started to be built. The King's Road, the Rose Road, the Ocean Road, the Gold Road, and the High Road. Basically, Jaehaerys realized that there's like no roads connecting cities and towns in this kingdom, and we need to start building roads. So it is said that Maegelle attached herself to Alyssa when they were young, which Alyssa did not appreciate. As we can see, Maegelle was practically made to be a septa, and I'm sure was Jaehaerys' plan as well, to have one of his children join the Faith of the Seven. This is kind of because there was always tension between the Targaryens and the Faith of the Seven. Remember, I'm kind of alluding to the idea of the doctrine of exceptionalism and the Jonquil Pool situation, because Maegor the Cruel and the Faith of the Seven really did not get along, so Jaehaerys had to really heal that. So it was probably their plan to have at least one of their many kids join the Faith of the Seven, and Maegelle got that honor. Maegelle was promised to the Faith of the Seven in 73 AC at the age of 10. Queen Alysanne announced that this was in thanks for the mother blessing her with many children. In 87 AC, Maegelle took leave from her sept to stay with her grieving mother, who had lost her daughters Alyssa, Daella, and Visera in the space of 5 years. In 89 AC, Jaehaerys visited his daughter in Old Town during the first quarrel. The first quarrel is there's two quarrels, so it's basically huge fights between Alysanne and Jaehaerys where they don't speak to each other for like longer than 6 months. It was actually Maegelle who helped reconcile the king and queen in 90 AC, telling her father to conciliate with Alysanne in time for the wedding of her niece, Rhaenys. So actually, the reason Jaehaerys and Alysanne went to the Rhaenys' and Corlys' wedding in 90 AC, 10 years before we even see the first shot of House of the Dragon, was because of Maegelle Targaryen. So that's kind of a cool little fun fact. Maegelle nursed children afflicted with grayscale, but remember we see with grayscale in the show with Jorah Mormont, but became afflicted with grayscale herself and died in 96 AC. So she couldn't pull the Samwell Tarly and save people. Well, she did probably save some people from grayscale, but she ended up dying of it. All right. Archmaester Vaegon Targaryen. I said we'd get back into the maesters. Okay, guys. So this is going to be interesting again. So looking at the second quote, we can tell that Vaegon is not only nerdy and bookish, but kind of a dick too. Jaehaerys and Alysanne wanted Vaegon to marry his younger sister, Daella, who we will get into in the next slide because she's actually very important and significant. You'll see why in the next slide. But Vaegon did not like Daella and made it apparent to everyone that he would never marry his younger sister. So, Vaegon becoming Archmaester may hurt my chances of the Maester conspiracy being a thing, or does it? Let me explain. It is said that Vaegon was never robust. People considered him to be sour. He was not a coward, but neither took joy from the play of squires and pages. He was a miserable fighter and not well trained in arms. He was a bookish boy and much preferred the library, where he could often be found. Books were his only passion. This could imply that Vaegon was in fact, when he became one, was more on the side of the Maesters than the Targaryens. But again, that is all speculation. Another idea could be, does seem strange to me that Vaegon died right after the Great Council. Even though he was Archmaester, maybe no other Maester actually shared the plans of the Maester conspiracy with Vaegon. Because it is said in the books that Vaegon was actually called to King's Landing when Balon died, not to become king, because no one, not even himself, wanted to be king, and Jaehaerys knew that. But some speculate that it was Vaegon's idea for the Great Council of 101 AC. So maybe he was part of, he actually, because it could have been his idea, and it probably was his idea, maybe Vagon was a part of this conspiracy. So maybe there was a Targaryen doing some inside job work, which is kind of crazy. So again, did he have something to do with the Maester conspiracy? Again, all we can really do is speculate here, guys. So that's kind of interesting. So we had a Septa, and now we had a Maester of King Jaehaerys that joined one of the major institutions in Westeros. But let's move to the eighth child, Princess Daella Targaryen or Daella Arryn. So she is significant, I said. So born in 64 AC, died in 82 AC. So she only lived till 18. But Princess Daella Targaryen, again, was the eighth child of Queen Alysanne and King Jaehaerys. She was married to Lord Roderick Arryn, with whom she had one child, Aemma Arryn, who we know from the show. So, Daella was small of stature. On her toes, she stood 5 feet and 2 inches. Everyone who met her judged her younger than she was in truth, as there was a childish aspect to her. Her mother, Queen Alysanne, described Daella as my little flower. As she grew to maidenhood, she was described as pretty, enough to attract the attention of young lords, but wasn't singled out as being like super pretty or anything. She was considered kind, gentle, sweet, kind of like Maegelle, but much more shy than Maegelle. She liked flowers, but was afraid of gardens, bees, and cats. She was not clever. Although she could read, Daella was not like super smart. Let's just say it like nicely like that. She was unable to even memorize the simplest of prayers, it says in the show. She worshipped her mother, Queen Alysanne, and she really liked her sister Maegelle, which makes sense because their personalities are somewhat similar. But she was terrified of her older sister, Princess Alyssa, and frightened of her brother, Prince Vagon. Daella and Lord Roderick Arryn were married before the year turned, so this would have been in 80 AC. They got married in a small ceremony in the Sept on Dragonstone in front of a small crowd. As Daella had declared that she could not stand the shame of a bedding ceremony, there was no bedding followed that wedding. Afterwards, Daella accompanied Roderick to the Eyrie, where she met his children. Although she immediately clashed with Alyce Arryn, the eldest, she became fond of the younger three and of her. From time to time, Daella sent letters to Queen Alysanne, written by Lord Roderick's youngest daughter, Amanda, in which she spoke of how happy she was with Lord Roderick Arryn. But eventually she becomes pregnant, basically, with Aemma Arryn, and she dies in the birthing bed like Aemma Arryn. So there's some cool parallelism there, guys. So actually, Daella Targaryen is the grandmother of Rhaenyra. So the grandparents of Rhaenyra Targaryen, Roderick Arryn, Daella Targaryen, Balon Targaryen, and Alyssa Targaryen. So 3 of Rhaenyra's grandparents were siblings. Again, guys, incest is bad. But with that being said, I think that's all I have on Daella. Again, she was pretty significant. It's why we see Rhaenyra's quartered sigil with the Arryn. It all stems from Daella and Roderick. That's why Rhaenyra has some Arryn blood in her. Let's move on to the 9th child. Okay, guys, from here on out, it's going to get a little shorter. Actually, no, this is the last long one. The last, like, 3 to 4 are going to be pretty quick because there's not much written about them. But with that being said, I do need a sip because my mouth is dry. So Sarah was Sarah Targaryen, guys. There's a lot to say about Sarah Targaryen. We hear about Sarah Targaryen in this last episode. Sarah Targaryen is the mother of Hugh the Hammer. So we know this because Sarah was a what's a nice word for this? Basically a paramour that eventually moved to Lys after many, many fights with her father. Jaehaerys did not get along with Sarah, which is kind of funny. He probably had the hardest time with Sarah because her son, Hugh, ends up riding Jaehaerys's dragon, Vermithor. So that's fun. Grandpa and grandkid. But so apparently Hugh was raised in Lys, and I'll get to why she got to Lys. But Hugh must have been raised in Lys and then moved to King's Landing because he said in the show he knew his mother. So with that being said, we don't really know who Hugh's father is. It's probably just some random dude in Lys, if I'm being totally honest. But Sarah was a courageous and clever girl, in her own way as clever as her brother Vagon. She was as strong and quick-spirited as her sister Alyssa. She was demanding and disobedient. Her first word was no. According to Archmaester Gildane, I can never pronounce that. However, Sarah was a fierce and stubborn young girl who thrived upon attention and became bad tempered whenever she did not receive anything. It was difficult to resist Sarah when she wanted to be charming. Sarah quickly learned how to get anything she wanted to from her father. However, she could not as easily manipulate her mother, Queen Alysanne. Although her two eldest brothers, Aemon and Balon, were always amused by Sarah's mischiefs, they never knew the worst of them. And according to Sept and Barth, Sarah's sisters all disliked her to various degrees. So she was definitely disliked by the rest of her sisters. So basically, guys, there was this big scandal that I'm gonna try and sum up. I couldn't put it as a quote, guys, but basically in 84 AC, so she ends up moving and not moving, but escaping the lease to go be like the head of a pleasure house in 85 AC. But in 84 AC, basically there's this like whole scandal that like she has like basically like has sex with like three dudes, like a Connington, a Beesbury, and I can't remember the last one, but she has three like lovers, and then she also has like basically has sex with like two other girls on top of that, and like she lies to Jaehaerys and Alysanne about it, and eventually like one of the girls who part of their like I don't know how to say this like orgy group like was pregnant with one of like the Beesbury's kids, and eventually like or not, it might have been the Connington's kids, one of the Connington's kids, and Jaehaerys is super pissed, like basically like doesn't acknowledge Sarah as his one of his daughters anymore, and basically actually gets into a one-on-one duel with the Stinger, the Beesbury guy, who also has sex with Sarah, and Jaehaerys is like, fight me, and Jaehaerys kills him in a one-on-one combat, which is pretty sick. So that's actually how Lord Beesbury from the show gets onto the council from that all that stuff, because that was his brother. They got murked. So that's kind of a fun fact. And you see Lord Beesbury get murdered by Kristen Cole in season 1, episode 9. But yeah, so Sarah was definitely the mother of Hugh the Hammer, and definitely probably the worst of all of Jaehaerys' daughters in terms of her just general behavior, just put it at the least. But let's move on to the 10th kid. Okay, guys, from here on else, it'll get pretty fast. So Visera was born in 71 AC, died in 87 AC. There's kind of a weird story about Visera that I'll talk about. So Visera was the most beautiful of the daughters. She had deep purple eyes and silver gold hair, flawless white skin, and fine features. She was vain. Once, when a young squire called her a goddess, she simply agreed with him. The attention of great lords, famous knights, and callow boys fed her vanity until it became a raging fire. Viserys delighted in playing one boy off against another and setting them on foolish quests or having them perform contests. She was high-spirited and wild. She's described as sly, uncanny. According to Alysanne, Viserys desired to become a queen and therefore aimed to marry her brother Balon, not for love, but for ambition. So basically, there's a weird story that Viserys gets like drunk one night and tries to like get in bed with Balon, because like at this point Alyssa would be dead, and Visera was like wanted to be more powerful, and Balon rode Vagar and was like the second up after Aemon at this point to become king, and she like got into his bed, and basically Balon was like, nah, I'm good. um and so yeah, so that was a cool little story. Balon like kicked out Visera. And eventually Visera actually dies because she escapes her guards and she rides on a horse to have like one last night of fun before she has to marry a fat manderly or something, which she did not want to do. And then she basically like breaks her neck falling off her horse. So that's what happens to Visera. Poor Visera. But let's move on to the 11th child, Gaemon Targaryen, guys. That is not Gaemon Targaryen pictured in the left. That is Gaemon the Glorious. You'll see why. Gaemon Targaryen, known as Gaemon the Glorious, was the second of Dragonstone of House Targaryen. So Gaemon, guys, so Gaemon Targaryen, the kid of Alysanne and Jaehaerys, was named after Gaemon the Glorious, who I'm mostly going to talk about because he's pretty interesting. Because Gaemon dies within 3 months of being born, so you don't even have a picture of him. Born in 73 AC, died in 73 AC. But let's talk about Gaemon the Glorious. He was the second Lord of Dragonstone of House Targaryen. Gaemon was the son of Lord Aenar Targaryen and had at least one sister, Daenys Targaryen. That's Daenys the Dreamer, guys, who probably rode Balerion. He came, actually, I think we know that. He came to Dragonstone along with his family in 114 BC for conquest. Gaemon was married to Daenys, and together they had several children, Aegon, Helena, and at least one other younger daughter. Aegon and Helena eventually inherited the rule of Dragonstone from Gaemon. Gaemon was called Gaemon the Glorious, and he is remembered as the greatest Targaryen lord of Dragonstone during the Century of Blood. So that is why they named this son Gaemon. But so the Century of Blood, guys, real quick, and then we'll move to the 12th, because I know we're pushing 30 minutes here. Gaemon the Glorious was just like a really powerful dragon lord on Dragonstone during the Century of Blood. And the Century of Blood was after old Valyria like went up in flames and there was chaos basically in Essos. So he held the fort down pretty well. But let's get into the 12th kid, Valerion Targaryen. Not much to talk about, guys. He died within 1 year. There is some kind of interesting things. There's not even a picture of him, but there is some interesting things in this quote. So in 78 AC, Valerion died a fortnight short of his first name day. Remember, we see in House of the Dragon, season 1, episode 3, that Aegon makes it to his second name day. So in like Westeros, in this world, if you make it to your second name day, there's like a big celebration because odds are you're gonna like live on from there. So he didn't even make it to his first name day. And I thought the second part of this quote was interesting. The queen took his passing with resignation. I am 42 years old, she told the king. You must be content with the children I have given you. I am more suited to be a grandmother than a mother now, I fear. So basically, at this point, it's incredible that Alysanne is still even having kids. She's 42 years old, and this is medieval times, which is crazy. She's just tired. Like, it doesn't even seem like she cares that he died, which is crazy. She's just tired. And honestly, like, she's done with it. Let's get into the last kid, guys. Gael Targaryen. So she lived pretty long, actually. She lived for almost 20 years. So she was the youngest kid. So Gael was born in 80 AC, a winter year, giving her the name the Winter Child. According to some, the name was because Queen Alysanne was in the winter of her childbearing years. So Queen Alysanne was 44 when she had Gael, which is incredible. She was cared for by Grand Maester and Septa Lyra, who nursed her through her first year. And after her sisters Alyssa, Daella, and Visera had died within the span of 5 years, Gaella became a comfort for her mother, Queen Alysanne, along with her older sister, Maegelle. Gael became Alysanne's constant shadow and even slept with her in her bed. In 99 AC, Gael disappeared from court. It was announced that she had died from a summer fever. After the deaths of both the old king and the good queen, it was revealed that she actually had been seduced and impregnated by a traveling singer, and she had given birth to a stillborn son. And overwhelmed by her grief, she walked into Blackwater Bay and drowned. According to some, Queen Alysanne never recovered from losing Gael. Following her death, Alysanne could no longer stand to be in King's Landing and at the Red Keep. She herself, Alysanne, would die in 100 AC, and even in the show, we find out that Viserys says, like, after Alysanne dies, King's Landing becomes like way like worse in many ways. So that is all 13 kids, guys. That was a lot. I made it in under 35 minutes though, so I'm happy with that. Look out, guys, for my season 2, episode 8 predictions, and please like and subscribe if you can. Thank you.